Okay, and with that, we'll get started. Hello and welcome to this evening's Clackamas County Assessment and Taxation Property Tax Town Hall. I'm Scott Anderson with Clackamas County's Public and Government Affairs, and I'll be facilitating the public comment portion of this meeting. So joining us tonight are Clackamas County Assessor Bronson Rueda, along with his staff, Deputy Assessor Todd Cooper, sales data and analyst Brad Erlin and Brandy Peters, senior property appraiser in our farm and forest section, Jeff Bennett, taxation analyst Dina Medicon, assessment and taxation specialist Beth Crow, and appraisal supervisor Alicia Nye. My thanks to all of you for being here tonight. The purpose of tonight's town hall is for residents to gain a better understanding of property taxes and have confidence in the tax system, and for our experts to answer any questions you may have about values, property taxes, or the tax process. Here's how it's going to go tonight. Assessor Rada will open with some comments and a presentation about this year's property taxes. This will last about an hour. If you have a question during or about Assessor Rueda's presentation, please don't hesitate to ask it. During the presentation, you can ask questions via the Q&A function or the chat function. Those are at the top or bottom of your Zoom interface, depending on your device. Simply type your question in either of those places, and we'll go ahead and read it during the presentation and get you an answer. After Assessor Rueda is finished, we'll hold a regular question and answer forum portion of the event. At that point, you have two options. You, again, can either use the Q&A function or you can use the chat function. Now, please know that questions asked via the Q&A function and answers given to it will be displayed publicly to attendees. And know that this event is being recorded. Therefore, all questions asked over the Q&A function and the answers given will be archived in the recording and posted for others to see. Private information should not be shared. During the open forum, questions asked over the chat function will not be shared publicly, but one of our staff members will respond to you directly via the chat. So, if you do not want to share your information publicly later, you are strongly encouraged to ask your question over the chat or to contact an assessment and taxation appraiser directly offline during office hours. And you can do that by calling the main office line at 503-655-8671 or by sending an email to propertytaxinfo@clackamas.us. Please note that the office hours are Monday through Thursday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., and I'll put this information in the chat right now. I will be going over all this information once again after Assessor Rueda's presentation is over. This town hall will be available to watch later this week. And with that, we're going to go to Clackamas County Assessor Bronson Rueda for his opening comments and presentation. Assessor Rueda.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Bronson Rueda, the Clackamas County Assessor, and I would like to welcome you to our annual virtual town hall. I want to start by saying thank you to our public and government affairs partners, Scott Anderson, Gary Johnson, and Garrett Teague, for your in-front and behind-the-scenes help with this year's event. I also want to thank all the assessment and taxation staff that are here tonight to help field questions. I appreciate you putting in the extra time to support me and our customers. I also want to tell you a little bit about myself before we go through the presentation. I joined the Clackamas County Assessment and Taxation Department in 2019 as the Deputy Assessor, and I was elected to my first four-year term as the Assessor, which began in 2023. Prior to my time at Clackamas County, I spent 8 years at the Oregon Department of Revenue in the Property Tax Division, where I managed about 40 appraisers and 3 frontline managers. I also spent 9 years as a commercial fee appraiser. About half of that time, I managed a team of appraisers that specialized in office and medical office valuations in Oregon and Southwest Washington. Now, about today's presentation, one of the goals, as Scott mentioned, is to help attendees gain a better understanding of Oregon's property tax system. I will also give a broad overview of our real estate market and some specific details regarding Clackamas County's property tax data. If you have questions throughout this presentation, which is about an hour, please don't hesitate to ask. And Scott gave instructions on typing that into the chat. Lastly, I'm adding an interesting segment to this year's virtual town hall. I think it's interesting. I'm going to shine a virtual spotlight on 2 staff members at different points in the presentation where they will talk a little bit about their work and area of expertise. So before I get into the next slide, there's 2 things I want to go off script and address. One of them is the hours. Scott talked about the hours, which are correct, but right now we have extended in-office hours from 7:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Thursday through November 17th. With the exception of no, we're not open on this Friday and next Friday, which is November 14th, November 14th, we are open from 8 to 4 p.m. only for tax payments. I think I got all that correct. If you have any questions about office hours, always check our website and call into our office before you come over just to make sure. The other thing I wanted to address is we had a couple questions emailed to us before the presentation, and I want to address one of those. The question was, how are taxes calculated? Essentially, that was the question. Is it based off of real market value or assessed value? And taxes are calculated using a tax rate that is applied to the assessed value. And I'll get into that and much more during the presentation. So hopefully, if I had a quiz, you'd all pass that with flying colors. So let's move on. This next slide features a 4.5-minute video giving an overview of Oregon's property tax system. This is the only video I'll be showing this evening, so please sit back and enjoy. It's very informative and can also be found on our website. The video will give you a good base of knowledge, and I will cover similar topics in more depth during my presentation. So, without further ado,
this is Joe Meek, one of the most famous men in Oregon history, fur trapper, mountain man, and the first marshal of the Oregon Territory. Joe was fearless. But Joe had an image problem. You see, Joseph Lafayette Meek was also Oregon's first tax collector. In 1843, voluntary contributions were solicited to pay Oregon's provisional legislators. The first-year returns totaled $81.50. Clearly, an assessment was due and enforcement needed. So the legislators decided to tax virtually everything: a person's pocket watch, their horse, saddle, clothing, even tools of their trade. The next year, 1844, the state assessment roll totaled $218,000, with cattle constituting almost half the roll. And that's the way property taxes started in Oregon. People paid property taxes as a percentage of the market value of their property. It was called a levy system, and has stayed that way for over a century. Now it took a while for Oregonians to begin to appreciate what tax dollars do for quality of life. They provide for schools, law enforcement, and fire protection. Citizens were safer, happier, and more comfortable. Life was good. Then, as it always seems to happen, taxes increased. Part of it was because property values kept rising, but part of it also was that there were virtually no limits on the amount of property taxes that districts could levy. Finally, in 1990, Oregon voters approved Measure 5. Measure 5 placed limits on 2 broad categories of property taxes: taxes for public schools and taxes used to support other government operations like fire and police protection. Starting in 1990, real estate values really began to climb, negating some of the good that Measure 5 had done. Still searching for relief from rising taxes, in 1996, Oregonians approved Measure 47, which was designed to limit how fast and how much property values could increase. However, the legislature soon found that measure unworkable. It was scrapped and quickly replaced by Measure 50, which was approved by voters in May of 1997. Measure 50 significantly changed the property tax system. It separated assessed value from real market value. creating a more stable and predictable tax bill from year to year. Under the previous levy-based system, taxing districts received the full amount of property tax authorized by the voters, regardless of changes in the total assessed value within the district. Annual changes in value had a direct effect on property owners because the rate was just recalculated to raise the amounts requested by the district, and that made tax bills yo-yo and unsettled the voters. Think of it as a cherry pie. Property owners authorize the districts to tax them at a rate that generates enough money to buy a cherry pie. Each year the district adjusts their rates so that they can buy the entire cherry pie. As the amount of taxable property and its value fluctuates, what they charge each taxpayer changes in order to still be able to buy the whole pie. And when the cost of the pie goes up, so does each taxpayer's property tax bill. Under the new rate-based system, changes in the total assessed value of a taxing district do not change the tax rate. Measure 50 created a maximum assessed value, which was the real market value of your property in 1995 less 10%. Taxes were calculated on the assessed value, which is the lower of the real market value and the maximum assessed value. Since then, growth in the maximum assessed value is limited to 3% regardless of fluctuations in the real estate market, provided there have been no changes to the property, such as new construction. For homes built after 1995, the maximum assessed value is determined using the ratio of maximum assessed value to real market value of similar properties in the county in the year constructed or improved. Long story short, at the time, voters wanted tax limitations and predictability. And while it's not a perfect solution, it is an improvement. If you have questions about any of the content of this video, please reach out to your local assessment and taxation office, and they'll fill you in.
Okay, if you like that video, you can find more informative videos on our website. There are a total of 8 videos relating to Oregon's property tax system. If you have trouble locating them, please call our office and we can assist. All right, before getting into the meat of this slide, there are 2 important pieces of information to know that will help you understand some of the data in this presentation. Number 1, the assessment date for the values and property tax on your current tax statement is January 1st, 2025. However, the market information used to value your property on your current tax statement is largely from 2024. This is important to remember as we move forward. If there was a market value change in your property in the last 6 months, that market value change is not going to be reflected on your current tax statement. Number 2, there will be numerous slides in this presentation that have a lot of data. In most of the slides, I will be pointing out highlights and I won't cover the entirety of the slide. So please ask questions if there is something I don't cover that you are curious to learn more about. Now let's cover the slide. The January 1st, 2005 real market value in our county grew by 3.3%. As a point of reference, last year's real market value growth was 1.4%. And the year before, it was 6.1%. The wording on the right of this slide shows a few stats we had in Clackamas County from new construction: 24 new subdivisions, 795 new homes built, and $1.34 billion in additional taxable value from new construction. All right, here are some January 1st, 2025 stats from RMLS of the Portland metropolitan area housing market. The next slide, we will drill down to Clackamas County stats, but here we will focus on the Portland metro area at a high level. And these stats include Clackamas, Multnomah, Washington, Yamhill, and Columbia counties. You can see from the 4th bullet point, sales of residential properties slowed down with an increase in total market time. Also, both average and median sale prices increased slightly, but less than the 3.3% increase in Clackamas County. All of the indicators on this page point to a real estate market that is holding steady in the Portland metro area compared to last year that showed a slight decline in average and median prices. I think the market has rebounded a little from the initial shock of the mortgage rate increase in 2023 and has adjusted accordingly. As promised, here's a sample of RMLS data showing the change in market values from January 1st, 2024 to January 1st, 2025 for select Clackamas County neighborhoods. Note that the neighborhoods show how diverse our county is from urban to rural, and the value changes show the difference in market change in those real estate sectors. From the data, you can see some areas of the county had value appreciation and others had a decrease in value. However, the overall market value in the county went up 3.3%. On this slide, we're looking at changes in value according to our internal sales study to reach market value as of January 1st, 2025. Here are all of the 16 cities in our county, plus the unincorporated Damascus area. Remember, I already stated real market value in the county grew 3.3% overall. Most of the market areas on this slide support the 3.3% growth, with just the Portland area that is located in Clackamas County showing some downward adjustment. And I'm hoping you can see my arrow. Here's the Portland area, and this is just the Portland portion that is in Clackamas County, had a -4 to 3% increase, -4 decrease plus 3% increase. All right, this is a 2025 calendar year timeline of some of the events for my department. It represents both a calendar year and how we operate on a property tax year. And the property tax year is the same as our fiscal year. Note that January 1st of every given year, right here, January 1st, is our assessment date. And we don't mail tax statements until all the way over here in October. And then the first property tax payment is due by November 15th, nearly a year after the assessment date. Now, I want to make one comment right here. November 15th is the statutory due date for property tax payments. However, if that November 15th date falls on a non-working day, so a weekend, Saturday or Sunday, then it's the next business day where tax payments are due. So this year, November 15th falls on a Saturday. So that means everybody in Clackamas County gets 2 extra days to pay their property taxes, and the due date is November 17th this year instead of November 15th. Doesn't mean you shouldn't pay early, just to be sure, but November 17th is the due date this year. All right, so
Bronson, we actually have a quick question on on your previous slide.
Sure.
The question is, if Lake Oswego declined by 0.3%, why would my RMV increase, granted only marginally, rather than declining?
So I have, the question I heard was Lake Oswego. Lake Oswego we have as a 0.1% increase to 0.5% increase, not a decline. The only decline we had is the Portland area.
Oh, it was the slide before this. I'm sorry.
Slide before. Okay, so this is RMLS data. This is data that is put together by a different source than our data. So this is RMLS data, which stands for Real Estate Market Listing Service. The data that we have, that we use for our sales that we collect, shows, whoops, going the wrong way, shows a range of 0.1% plus 0.1% to plus 0.5%. So if you look at your price, the person who asked this question, it sounds like their RMV did go up, and they probably went up within this range of 0.1% to 0.5%, because we use our data when we make adjustments to value. We don't use the RMLS data. We do use it to reference as supportive information to see how it aligns with our data. But overall, the data that we collect, that we verify, we rely on to make these adjustments. Let me know if there's any follow-up on that, Scott.
Will do. Thank you.
Okay, so back here to the timeline. All right, let's take a step back and examine the assessment date for your current tax statement, which is January 1st, 2025. The time period to collect market data for the assessment date is from January 1st, 2024 to January 1st, 2025. It's important to make the connection again that the market period for your recent tax statement is from 2024. So understanding the timing of these events is crucial. So let's go over this information one more time from a different angle. Starting from November and working backwards, your property taxes are due November 15th, November 17th this year. The taxes you owe are collected, the taxes you owe are calculated based on the assessed value of your property as of the assessment date of January 1st, 2025. In other words, the values you are looking at on your tax statement represent a point in time nearly 10 months ago. There are also a few key dates on this timeline that may be of interest to you. Please take a moment to look at the timeline and ask any questions you may have. While you're looking at the timeline, I want to do my first staff spotlight. Please welcome Jeff Bennett. While Jeff is turning on his camera and microphone, I will let you know that Jeff has been with the Clackamas County A&T Department for 21 years. And is currently a senior appraiser on the farm forest team. Jeff has a wide range of knowledge, but tonight he wants to educate you on a certain segment of his work. Take it away, Jeff.
Thank you, Bronson. Hello, everyone. I'm Jeff Bennett. Like Bronson said, I'm a senior appraiser in the Farm and Forest Department at Clackamas County. Our department does several things, but one of the main things is that we administer all of the farm and forest tax deferral programs throughout Clackamas County. Now, these are special assessment programs that property owners can apply for, which will reduce their overall assessed value if they meet certain criteria and their land is being used as either farmland or forest land. If anybody would like any additional information about these programs, there is a link on our website that goes over them, or feel free to give our office a call. We have staff that can answer all your questions. And more specifically, if you have questions about forest land, this is where I like to plug an annual event that happens at Clackamas County called Tree School. It's an annual event that happens at the Clackamas Community College every year in March. The Oregon State University Extension Office puts this on, and it's an all-day event of classes that answer all sorts of questions about forest land. But our office specifically actually teaches a class that goes over all about the forest land deferral program. If you want more info about that, give our office a call or Google the Clackamas County Tree School. And with that, I will send it back to Bronson.
All right, thank you, Jeff. Scott, any questions in the chat that need to be addressed?
I don't think so right now, no.
Okay, perfect. Let's move on. Now we're going to get into some heavy topics. So if you've been watching TV at this point while listening, you might want to turn that TV off and turn on max brain power, because we're going to need it going through these next handful of slides. All right, and these next grouping of slides covers property tax law, specifically Measure 5 and Measure 50. I will cover these two measures in detail, but at a high level, our property tax system is shaped by these two initiatives put on the ballots by voters that are now part of the Oregon Constitution. I typically try not to read directly from slides, but I think this slide warrants an exception. So I'm going to go ahead and read these two measures. Measure 5 Measure 5 passed in 1990 is a tax limitation and sets limits on the amount of taxes that can be collected from each property in both the education and general government categories. Measure 50 passed in 1997, and it is a value limitation and limits maximum assessed value, or MAV. It limits the growth to 3% annually. Taxes are based on the lower of real market value or maximum assessed value. In addition, permanent tax rates were established for all local districts with existing tax bases and serial levies. So the big takeaway here is that Measure 5 is a tax limitation and Measure 50 is a value limitation. Neither one of these measures places a 3% cap on your tax growth per year. We will dig deeper into this later in the presentation with some 2025 real-world examples. First, let's cover more about Measure 50. Okay, before I get into how Measure 50 works, I think it's important to understand why we have Measure 50. Prior to Measure 50, taxes were based on the market value of a property, and the video talked a little bit about this. As you know, market values can fluctuate up or down in any given year. Pre-Measure 50, property taxes fluctuated up and down accordingly, creating a property tax environment that was unpredictable. Remember, this year in Clackamas County, the market value increased 3.3%, and last year, the market value increased over 1.4%, and then over 6.1% 2 years ago. I imagine most people would get frustrated if their tax bill fluctuated the last 30 years with the same variations as the real market value. Well, the voters of Oregon wanted more predictability or consistency in their property taxes, so Measure 50 was born. Okay, so how does Measure 50 work? Let's go over the bullets on the slide. First bullet, when Measure 50 was passed in 1997, maximum assessed value was created, or MAV. MAV in 1997 equaled 90% of the 1995 real market value. Bullet 2, going forward, Measure 50 limits future growth on MAV to 3% per year, with some exceptions. What are those exceptions? Let's look at Bullet 3 and find out. The exceptions include new construction, remodeling, development of new subdivisions, and rezoning. Bullet 4, Measure 50 established permanent tax rates for all local taxing districts with existing tax bases and serial levies. Last bullet, Measure 50 allows voters to approve new short-term local option levies to fund additional services or approve bond measures for capital improvements. These money measures are one of the main causes of property tax bills increasing more than 3% in a year. I will also note that the Oregon Department of Revenue teaches a 3-day class to Oregon County Assessment Taxation staff covering the Measure 50 topic that we're going over now, which proves the complexity and many dimensions of Measure 50 in Oregon's property tax system. We don't have 3 days. We only have about 45 minutes left of the presentation. So we're going to have to make do and ask questions as they come to you. All right, some of the information on this slide is a repeat of what we have already covered, but I think it is important enough to go over again, since some of the concepts are vital to know in order to understand Oregon's property tax system. First, it is important to understand 2 items which are covered in the first 2 bullets of this slide. 1, property in Oregon is not taxed on real market value. And I think that was one of the first questions we received via email today. What value are we taxed on? And that's assessed value. 2, property taxes in Oregon are based on a calculated Measure 50 assessed value. Referring to Bullet 3, for those familiar with California's Proposition 13, established in the late 70s, in Oregon, market value does not reset when property is sold. Summarizing the last bullet point, taxes in Oregon are calculated on the assessed value, which is the lesser of real market value or maximum assessed value. There's a lot to keep track of here, and I have my hands here because typically real market value is higher than maximum assessed value. Not always, but typically, especially for residential property. One more thing to think about. If you're saying to yourself, well, if maximum assessed value can only go up 3% per year, why do my property taxes sometimes go up more than 3% in a year? Again, one answer is new construction or remodeling a property. And another common answer is that voters in any given taxing district can vote in local options or bonds that can increase a property tax bill more than 3%. All right, Scott, anything in the chat box for questions?
I don't see anything.
All right, thank you, sir. All right, this next slide covers examples of how your taxes may go up more than 3% in any given year. Remember, neither Measure 5 or Measure 50 put a limitation on tax growth, just a tax limitation for education and government categories, and a maximum assessed value growth limitation. Again, the two most common examples are the first two bullet points on the slide: changes to a property and new money measures. For example, this year, the Oregon City School District had a new bond which increased taxes more than 3%. I want to emphasize again, taxes can go up more than 3% in a year. And you may be saying to yourself, Bronson, why do you keep saying that? Because we get multiple questions every year, dozens upon dozens, letting us know that telling us that we're doing illegal actions by having property taxes go up more than 3% in a year. But that is not illegal. That is part of the Oregon's property tax system.
Bronson, we actually have another question.
Fantastic.
On the previous slide, the 3.3% adjustment would seem to be inflated because of the 15% rate in Johnson City. What caused this and why are we paying for it?
Okay, so the previous slide. So Scott, if I understand the question, they're asking if real market value in Clackamas County only went up 3.3%. Why did values in Johnson City go up 15%? Is
I
that
believe so, yes.
okay? So the 3.3% is an overall total of all of Clackamas County. And Clackamas County has a wide variety of property types. We have rural, we have properties up by the mountain, we have city properties. So not all properties and all locations in the county are going to go up that 3.3%. That's an overall total. So areas like Johnson City went up 15%. That's higher than the 3.3%. Yes, it is. But per the sale information from the market that we have, that's an appropriate adjustment. Now, I will say if you live in Johnson City and you disagree with your market value or any of your values, you can appeal, and I encourage you to appeal. You know, we're not perfect. And if you have market information that supports something different, please give our office a call, file the appeal paperwork, and then later on in the presentation, I'm going to go over appeals, so we'll learn more about that later. But I highly encourage you to file an appeal if you think the values on your property tax statement are wrong. All right. We are here, I believe. Yep, we went over this. All right, this slide covers the value history of one account in Clackamas County. The time period begins in 1997, the start of Measure 50, and ends with the January 1st, 2023 value. You'll notice there's a break in the years from 2000 to 2010 because there simply isn't enough room on the page for all that data. But the data does cover the recession years in the early 2010s time period to illustrate how our property tax system works. So referring to the slide, the term cut up here in the upper left-hand corner in red This refers to the 10% off the 1995 real market value to establish the first 1997 maximum assessed value. Say they got a benefit in 1997. The term cap, which is all these following years, the cap refers to the 3% growth cap for maximum assessed value, with exceptions. Again, I want to emphasize the 3% maximum growth refers to the growth limit for MAV, not a growth limit in tax increases year over year. What stands out on this slide for me is the market change right here in red, and the AV change down here also in red. The market value up here, the market value fluctuates according to what the real estate market does in any given year with big swings up and down. But the assessed value grows at a steady 3%. Look at the market change of negative 7.06, negative 12.75 for this account. And then in 2014, double-digit growth, 11.32%, 17.78%. That's big. Those are big swings in value. And remember, property taxes are based off of assessed value. And in this situation, the assessed value is down here, only went up 3% per year. So this is an example of the property tax predictability taxpayers wanted. All right, now we're going to talk about change property ratio. This is important. We're going to get to an example of Measure 50 calculation soon, but we need to learn about change property ratio first. What is it? What's a change property ratio? Or remember, Measure 50 was enacted back in 1997, and it created a maximum assessed value for all property at that time. And that all those properties received a benefit because the real market value that was changed to the maximum assessed value or created a maximum assessed value took the 1995 value, which was lower than that 1997 value, minus 10%. So that created a benefit back in 1997 for property owners for existing properties. But what about property built post 1997? How do they get a maximum assessed value benefit? Well, for new construction, the assessor's office values the property, which creates a real market value. Then a change property ratio, referred to as CPR, is applied to the real market value, which creates a maximum assessed value for that property, providing a benefit similar to property already in existence and similar to the property back in 1997. The CPR is the ratio of maximum assessed value to unchanged real market value for specific property types and is calculated every year. Here is a list and history of Clackamas County's CPRs since 2015. Take a look at the column labeled 1XX residential up here in the upper left. The CPR for residential properties in the 2025-26 tax year is 0.537. This means that any new property built as of January 1st, 2025 will have the ratio applied to the real market value to create a maximum assessed value. As you can see, since 2015, the residential CPR has generally decreased until last year. A decrease in CPR happens when property values are generally rising more than 3%. The 1XX CPR this year increased slightly from last year. Remember, real market value for the county grew 3.3%, which is just slightly more than the maximum assessed value increase of 3%, meaning not a significant separation between the percentage growth of RMV and MAV, which is why CPR only increased slightly. Now, who is ready for an example? Scott, any comments in the chat saying, let's see an example already?
Actually, we've got a question about if there's anything in the ORAs or ORSs that prevent Clackamas County from requiring school districts to identify which bonds the bond requests go to.
Say that again, Scott.
Sure. Is there anything in the ORAs or ORSs that prevent Clackamas County from requiring school districts to identify which bonds the bond requests go to.
Okay, so if I'm understanding the question correctly, it sounds like it's talking about how a bond is described in, say, the voter's pamphlet. And so there may be ORSs about that, and I'm just shooting this out there right now. If any staff know for certainty the answer to this, let Scott know so you can speak up. But that kind of oversight over the Oregon property tax system doesn't come from our office. That comes, I don't know where it comes from, but I do know the Oregon Department of Revenue down in Salem, they oversee the Oregon property tax laws, and they may know the answer to that. We can email them for you. In fact, Dina, give me a thumbs up if this is okay. If you can email DOR with that question to see if they have an answer, and then we can get the information from the person, if we can, from the person that asked us, and we can get back with them.
Perfect. We've got actually another question that that I'll ask. So if a property changes, for example, with an addition or a remodel, does the entire property get reassessed or just the adjustment for the new or changed area that was added?
Just the new property.
Okay, just the new area.
Just the, so if it's if you have an existing house and they remodel the kitchen, then we will value what the increase is to the property based off of that remodel and just CPR the additional value.
Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome. Good questions so far. I love it, people. Keep them coming. All right. Now, I thought I heard, Scott, you said that there were many people in the chat that were requesting an example. So let's move on to an example. All right, remember, Measure 50 created a tax benefit for properties in existence in 1997, but for new property, it's fair to give that same benefit. Let's say a property owner builds a new home valued at $1 million. Here we go. Here's the example, 1 million RMV. We need to give this home the Measure 50 benefit and calculate the maximum assessed value. We apply the 2025-26 residential change property ratio of 0.537. Here's the math right here. You can get your calculators out and check it, or do it in your head. Apply the CPR. After applying the residential CPR, the maximum assessed value is created, which is $537,000. Lastly, and this goes back to the question we had before this even started, taxes are calculated from the assessed value, and the assessed value equals the lesser of real market value or maximum assessed value. And again, I have maximum assessed value down here because typically, especially for residential property, the maximum assessed value is lower than the real market value. So in this example, the maximum assessed value is lower. So the property has an assessed value of $537,000. This creates a Measure 50 tax benefit similar to other properties already in existence. So in this example, if you had a house that was worth $500,000 and you renovated the kitchen, and we determined that renovation was worth $100,000, then the real market value in this example, you'd start with $100,000 and then add the change property ratio and go from there. All right, Scott, let me know if there's any questions on CPR or anything that we've covered so far with Measure 50. If not,
Yes, we've actually got one more question that came in.
okay.
What is the formula used to calculate taxes? Assessed value times what?
Times the tax rate.
Times the tax rate.
So
Gotcha.
on your property tax statement, it doesn't show the tax rate. It just shows the taxing districts and the amount of tax for each taxing districts. But we have on our website all of the tax rates for all of the taxing districts and tax code areas in Clackamas County. So if you can If you can locate it on our website, good job, kudos. If you can't, give our office a call, talk to Dina Medicon. She's on the this webinar right now. Dina is our taxation analyst, and she has a next level level of knowledge that she'll be able to help you. She'll teach you how to fish and how to find that information and explain anything that you want in regards to tax rates. Okay, anything else, Scott?
That's it for now.
All right, let's move on. We are on slide 16 of 44, just so you know. All right, I have talked about Measure 50, the benefits provided, and the creation of maximum assessed value. I give an example of how new construction creates an exception event and a maximum assessed value for a property. But there are other exception events besides just building a new house. This slide covers those exception events like remodeling, which was the question we had previously, and additions. To tie the concept of Measure 50 back to the misconceived perception that property taxes can only go up 3% per year, nearly every Measure 50 event will increase maximum assessed value more than 3% on a property because you are adding more value than was there before. Thus, taxes will most likely go up more than 3% with Measure 50 exception events. All right, let's move on. All right, this is some fun stuff here. These next handful of slides, I think there's 6 of them. I think they're interesting. They provide examples of new construction or remodels in Clackamas County within this last year that trigger Measure 50 exception events. Right here is an example of a demolished house. On the left, you have before. On the right, you have after. And it was replaced with a new house. All right, here's another example of a house torn down for new construction. And one more, a third example of a house torn down for new construction. I think this one's my favorite. I like the lines on this house. It pops for me personally. I know everyone has different tastes, but I like this one. It's not my house. All right, now we're getting into some remodels. Here's an example of a bathroom remodel adding value to an existing house. You have a new sink here, countertop, new cabinetry, new flooring, new tub insert, fixtures. This adds value. All right, here we have a family room remodel. You see the before and after. This adds value. Here, it looks like we have a new front door. Looks like new windows, or maybe they painted them. Can't tell from this picture. New baseboards for sure. Looks like there's a new heating or cooling unit here. And it looks like new flooring as well. Can't tell for sure, but in this picture, it looks like the flooring is going parallel with the door. And in this picture, it looks like it's going perpendicular to the door. So maybe new flooring, unless my old eyes are deceiving me. Also, it looks like this half wall was taken out, perhaps, and opened up the room a little bit. So nice remodel here. All right, last picture. This one's my favorite remodel. It's a kitchen. So I think this remodel, it was essentially gutted from floor to ceiling. You have new flooring. You have new island area, new countertops, new cabinetry. Looks like new windows, new lighting. This lighting soffit taken out. New appliances. Good looking remodel. If anyone disagrees that this is not a good looking remodel, please comment in the chat. We'll respect your opinion. All right, we'll move on. All right, this is from our website. snapshot from our website. You can go on here and play with this portion of our website. It's a search engine that allows you to put in your account number or address or anyone's address in Clackamas County, and it shows a 5-year history of your real market value and maximum assessed value. The red line is the real market value, and the maximum assessed value is the blue. Remember, I said for most property, residential property, the real market value is higher than the maximum assessed value. So remember, you are taxed on your assessed value, which is the lesser of real market value or maximum assessed value. So in this example, the assessed value has always been equal to the maximum assessed value because it's always been lower than the real market value. The slide also makes the point that market adjustments can be more extreme and different than the typical 3% yearly growth of maximum assessed value. For this property, real market value in red grew over 19% between 2021 and 2022, right here. Then only grew 1.32% for the next year. And then it went down a little bit, 0.67% the following year. And then grew 3% year the year, 3% the year after that. All the while, down here on the blue line, maximum assessed value grew a steady 3% per year since 2021. Again, this creates the predictability in property taxes voters desired through Measure 50. All right, now we are going to move on from Measure 50 to our next constitutional limitation, which is Measure 5. Measure 5 limits the amount of taxes that any one taxpayer can pay. The limits are based on real market value and fall into 2 categories: education and general government. And we're going to have an example here. The limitation on education is $5 per $1,000 of real market value. And the limitation on general government is $10 per $1,000 of real market value. It is important to note that the tax limitation calculation is applied to the real market value, but the actual tax is calculated from the assessed value. If the actual tax due goes above the Measure 5 limitations for either category, compression is created. So let's look at an example to kind of tie all these words into a visual and a real world example. All right, in this example, I used real data from this year from an account in Clackamas County. At the top, there are 2 values I will be referring to: real market value and assessed value. Note that the values are the same. This means the real market value is lower. So remember I said usually real market value is higher than maximum assessed value, but in this example, the real market value is lower, or it could be the exact same, but most likely lower than the maximum assessed value. Therefore, the real market value is the assessed value for this account. All right, referring back to the chart, below the values, there are 4 column headers: Measure 5 limit, tax calculation, tax imposed, and tax compression due to Measure 5. The next row is education, right here, which has a limitation, as I've talked about, of $5 in tax to every $1,000 of real market value. I have already done the math for you here, but I will walk you through the numbers. The Measure 5 limit on education is $1,839.18. This is calculated by dividing 5 into 1,000 and then multiplying the result to the RMV, $367,839. All right, the next column is tax calculation. The education rate is given at the bottom of the page. So down here at the bottom, these are the actual tax rates for this account. Again, all of this information is on our website. If you can't find it, And it's understandable. We have a lot of info on our website. Call our office. We'll link you with Dina and she'll show you where everything is. So the education tax rate is given, and it is 7.108 right here. This number is per 1,000 of assessed value right up here. The resulting tax owed, shown in the education row tax calculation column, is right here, $2,614.89. The resulting tax owed, shown in the education column. So the tax imposed is the lower of these two amounts, which is the Measure 5 limit, $1,839, and the difference is compression, $775.71. So the taxpayer is saving money by paying less taxes due to compression, but on the flip side, the taxing districts in the education category receive less money into their financial coffers. So that's for the education row. Next is general government. It's the same math. You can see that the Measure 5 limit for general government is lower than the actual tax that should be paid. So compression is created in the amount of $543.67. The next row is for bonds. Bonds are voted by the people and are not subject to Measure 5 limitations. Okay, now adding the education and general government compression indicates this account has a total of $1,319.38 in compression. Whoops. Now, if you're being exposed to this for the first time, it's a lot to take in. That being said, any questions on Measure 5? While you're thinking about that, lastly, if you want to find out if you have any compression for your property tax account, please, like I've said before, call our office and ask, or you can conduct the calculations on your own and determine if you have compression. Now, while we wait,
Bronson?
if there's any questions from
Yeah,
the gallery.
Bronson, we actually have a question going back to remodels or additions.
Sure.
How would your office go about determining the amount of the increase in value? Does an inspector or an assessor typically arrive on site to check?
Yes, so you know what, I'm going to give somebody else an opportunity to talk. Since Lynn Longfellow, she is the appraisal manager. She is out, I believe. She's not on, correct, Scott? I'm going to hand
That's
this
correct.
question, I'm going to hand this question over to Alicia Nye, that she can talk about how we value that new property. Are you okay with that, Alicia?
Sure. Yeah, so we would send an appraiser out. So in the case of an addition, we would review the plans that were submitted and look at those ahead of time and diagram the addition. And then we send appraisers out to inspect the property to verify the dimensions and the quality. They are all certified by the state as appraisers. So then they would estimate a real market value associated with either the addition or the remodel work that was done to the property. I hope that answers that.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Alicia. Being put on the spot, I appreciate you handling that question.
No problem.
Anything else, Scott, from the gallery?
No, I think that's it.
Well, you have, gallery, you have some time to ask another question, because right now we're going to conduct the second and last staff spotlight. Please welcome Beth Crow. While Beth is turning on her camera and microphone, I will let you know that she has been with the Clackamas County A&T Department for 8 years and is currently an assessment and taxation specialist 2 and our subject matter expert for select property tax programs, including the Senior and Disabled Deferral Program and Veterans and Active Duty Property Tax Exemptions. Beth is a valued member of our stellar customer service team, and her detailed knowledge helps guide customers through these complex programs. Beth, what information do you have for us tonight?
Thank you, Bronson. Hi, yes, I am the senior and disabled veteran specialist. And I'd like to just give a quick overview of the qualifications of when you want to apply for the senior deferral program. If you do want to apply for a disabled citizen, you must be receiving Social Security benefits by December 31st, the year before you file, and must, for a senior citizen, you have to be at least 62 by April 15th, the year that you file. And of course, you must live in Clackamas County. The Oregon Department of Revenue places a lien on the property and interest accrues at 6% annually. Once approved, you do have to recertify every 2 years and meet all qualifications. You can find out what these qualifications are on our website at clackamas.us /AT, and you can always reach out to me directly at 503-655-8671. And I'm always available to answer any questions and give you the details. Their application is also online, and any other questions, I'm always available Monday through Thursday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Bronson?
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent job.
Thank you.
Go ahead, on mute, there you go. There's an echo there. Excellent, thank you, Beth. So Scott, I'm assuming there's no more questions. I will march forward to the next slide. All right, now we're getting into some tax results. We have talked about how Oregon's property tax system works and the market value conditions for Clackamas County. Now let's focus on some of the results for the current 2025-26 tax roll. Mentioned previously, there was a 3.3% growth rate in total real market value for the county as of the assessment date of January 1st, 2025. And most properties' assessed value grew by 3%. So I'm going off scripture a little bit. I'm curious, the person that asked about the Johnson City 15% growth, if they can look at their tax statement and see what their assessed value growth was from year over year. It unless there were some changes to the property, it should be right around 3%. So take a look at that. All right, back to the slide. If you are one of the taxpayers who had a tax increase of greater than 3%, it may be due to a new money measure passing, a district levied more for bonded debt, or a local option rate increase. Likewise, if you had a tax increase of less than 3%, it could be due to taxing districts levied less or paid off bonded debt. Regarding compression, this year we had over 12,300 accounts in compression with an estimated 12.1 million in reduced tax. Last year we had more accounts in compression, but only 11.4 million in reduced tax. So for reference, we have about 170,000 accounts in Clackamas County. Now let's look at the taxing districts that had the greatest amount of rate changes, either up or down. And if anybody out there saw my press release, this information is also in the press release. But this slide shows the changes in levy rates for 2025. Take a look and see if any of these taxing districts are in your tax code area on your property tax statement. It may be an indicator of why your property taxes decreased or increased less or more than you anticipated. Where there are negative changes in red, those districts levied a little less for their bonds or the bond was paid off. There is one local option levy increase and a handful of new bonds this year. You can see them towards the bottom of the chart. So I'll orientate you here. You have the district column, levy type, and purpose of the levy. The levy type lets you know the new bond and local option, and then the purpose of that right here. I do want to highlight the biggest change is the Oregon, this year at least, is the Oregon City School District. A new bond passed that increased the 2025 bond rate by $1.25 per 1,000 of assessed value. This means for every $100,000 in assessed value, your property taxes will go up $125 for this bond alone. That is a big increase, and we have already received multiple inquiries about this new bond. There are over 20,000 residential properties in the Oregon City School District with an average assessed value of about $300,000, which equates to an average property tax increase of $375 just from this new bond. The average property tax increase this year for property owners in the Oregon City School District, so the percent increase is about 11%, and that is a large increase. I will note the largest increase last year was around the 17-18% in an area that had two bonds that were new on the roll, and that bond rate was nearly double the Oregon City bond rate. The accumulation of those two bonds were about double of the $1.25 that went through Oregon City School District this year. So bonds are essentially, actually, that's it on the slide. Any questions on that, Scott?
No questions about that.
All right, let's move on. All right, this one's also from my press release. And the previous slide, if you recall, outlined the money measure changes in the county. This slide outlines the typical changes by percent of property taxes. The data on this page is organized by school district, over here, by school district. And then within each school district, there may be sub-districts that can influence taxes. For example, a little below the middle of the chart is the Oregon Trail School District, right here. It shows the typical increase in property taxes for the city of Sandy at 4.44%, but the rural area of Sandy within the Oregon Trail School District went up 7.71%. The reason the rural area went up more than the city area is because the rural area had a new bond for Hoodland Fire, which didn't apply to the properties within the city of Sandy boundaries. And that you can see that here in the comments. City of Sandy, new bonds, Mount Hood Community College, rural, same Mount Hood Community College, but it also had the additional Hoodland Fire Bond. So go ahead and take a look at this chart and see where your property lands. What school district are you in? The highest percent increase may not be a surprise to you, but it was for properties within the Oregon City School District. We covered that bond increase on the previous slide. That is right here. Towards the top of the page, you will notice a few decreases that are in red. Those districts had bonds paid off. Remember, factors that control how much our property taxes change from last year include new voter-approved money measures, Measure 50 exception value, compression, and taxing districts levying lower or higher bond amounts, which is what this page is all about.
Bronson, we've actually got a quick question
Okay, great.
related to Oregon City. Why is Oregon City rural higher than in city limits?
Let's see. Let me orientate myself here. Oregon City. And so I am going to involve another person. I'm going to involve Dina Medicon. If you're there, she's our expert on everything, tax rates, bond rates, money measures, all that stuff. So Dina, this year, and I know there's a lot of factors that involve, but have you been able to determine why there's a difference in these two increased percentages?
Yes, it actually just comes down to the fact that the rate for Oregon City itself was already higher than what it was in the rural area. So when you do a percentage, because one is lower, the change makes it look much higher. It's an odd way to think of it, but it's really the way the math works. Just the percentage change doesn't look as big when you've already got big. There's really kind of no other way to explain it. That's the way math works. I hope that answers the question. It's you have to see it on paper to see how it works.
It's a numbers thing.
It is.
Okay. All right. And if Dina, if they wanted to see those actual numbers, could they contact you and you can walk them through the actual numbers to show how that math works?
I sure can.
Okay, there you go. Always here to help. All right, I think we are here. Tax certification stats. This is a slide that shows a lot of detailed data. If you focus on the 2025 column and work your way down, you can see the value and tax numbers for Clackamas County and the changes in the past couple of years, right here. On my screen, Scott, the top bar kind of blocks everything. Is that happening in your view, or is that just my view?
At the very top bar, I see that it says on the left-hand side, 2025, 2026 certified tax roll. And then, yeah, in gray, it's
Okay.
2025, 2024, 2023.
It just must be my screen where I have my arrow. So good, you can see the whole thing. That's just what I wanted to confirm. Okay. And then you can see the changes compared to the last couple of years. This year, the county's real market value was over 122 billion. You can see that up here. The taxable value is over 68 billion, and the tax imposed is over 1.23 billion. Interesting fact, we collect about 87% of the imposed taxes every year by the November 15th due date. Again, November 17th this year. For this tax season, that will be nearly $1.1 billion collected by November 17th. That's a lot. I think the high collection rate can be largely attributed to the 3% discount offered to taxpayers when the account is paid in full by the November 15th date. Again, this year, November 17th. So if you didn't know, if you pay your property tax bill in full by the due date in November, you get a 3% discount. It's a good deal. That is Oregon statute right there. All right, let's move on to some more stats. This slide shows 22 years of the change in total market value and assessed value in Clackamas County. The time period is post Measure 50, and you can see the ups and downs of the market value growth rate, including the recession years, 2009 through 2012. I have highlighted in a different color. We had 4 years in decline before it started to turn around to double-digit growth by 2014. So again, the decline in market value growth rate, and then 2014 double-digit growth rate. Now take a look at the assessed value column right over here. Note that every year the assessed value increased no matter what the market value did. This is due to the yearly 3% maximum assessed value growth on most accounts from Measure 50. Not 1 year did the assessed value growth show a negative number. However, the growth of the assessed value did dip below 3% in the 2010 through 2012 timeframe because of less construction and more accounts paying on market value instead of maximum assessed value. So again, typically real market value up here, maximum assessed value down here, assessed value equal to the lower. In this time period, there was a huge dip in housing prices, so that real market value for a lot of accounts dipped below that maximum assessed value. So now the assessed value was equivalent to the real market value. All right, and again, this slide also shows the predictability of assessed value due to Measure 50. All right, going on. Just to keep everybody awake, we're on slide 32 of 44. And we're at 7:18. I know I said about an hour, but we've had a lot of good questions, so that's extending the time frame. Thank you, everyone, for hanging in there. All right. The last slide showed how values fluctuated and grew over time. This slide focuses on the changes in taxes imposed since 2002. One item I want to point out on this slide is in that 2010 to 2012 timeframe, the growth rate in taxes dropped significantly due to the recession. Taxes still increased every year, just not at the rate seen in other years. All right, let's move on to the next slide, which is our last slide with current tax year stats. All right, this is, I think, is an interesting slide that shows the compression loss each year since 2011. Remember, compression loss typically increases when market values are going down and coming closer in line with the maximum assessed value. And then compression loss typically decreases as real estate appreciates and there is greater separation between real market value and maximum assessed value. Look at the chart to see how this is shown to be true from the historic numbers. From 2011 through 2013, when market values were generally declining in the recession, compression was increasing. Then in 2014, when the real estate market was rebounding, compression loss started to decline. The anomaly here is in 2019, when real estate market values were continuing to increase, but the compression loss also increased. Big jump in 2019, right here. This was due to money measures passing that increased the tax rate significantly for certain taxing districts that created compression, which is still present in this tax year. All right, now we've gone over all these tax stats and taxes. Let's see how these tax dollars are distributed. So this graph is actually on our website and was in my press release. This shows how much out of each property tax dollar collected goes to the local services in the county. Starting in the upper left is the schools, K through 12. They receive 42.75 cents of every dollar collected. Next is the county. They receive 17.6 cents of every property tax dollar collected. And then ending at the lower right is the miscellaneous category, which includes port, vector, water, cemetery, parks, and lighting. And that is down here at the bottom of the slide. They collect 1.82 cents of every property tax dollar collected. I have one more graphic. It's similar, but I will explain the difference. This one shows the amount of each tax dollar distributed to Clackamas County and what various programs within the county it goes to. You can see in the upper left, public safety gets the largest share this year at 70.3% of each tax dollar. My department, assessment and taxation, we get 5.4%. To the right of the dollar bill lists the programs in the general government category, which obtains 11.4 cents per dollar collected. And again, these are on the website if you want to take a deeper dive and analyze those. All right, here is an example of a property tax statement. Let's focus on the right of the statement. Near the top in a rectangular outline are the words 2005, 2006, 2025, 2026, current tax by district. This is a detailed list by taxing district of the property taxes owed. The first three lines comprise the education category. You can see here, it says education total. The next grouping of taxing districts is the general government category. Right here, all these levies are for the general government. Remember, these two categories are subject to compression through Measure 5 tax limitations. The last group has 5 line items, and notice at the end of those line items, it says excluded from limit total, right here. These line items are bonds voted in by the people, which are not subject to compression through Measure 5 tax limitations. Any questions on this tax statement? We also have a property tax statement guide on our website that provides further explanations of the different areas of the property tax statement. Scott, any questions on the property tax statement?
No, no questions.
Okay, good. All right, as promised earlier, we're going to talk about appeals next. In fact, the next four slides deal with the appeal process. It's important to note that in an appeal situation, a person is appealing their value. They are not appealing the amount of taxes owed. They may want their taxes to go down, but the appeal is of the value. As of July 1st, 2024, the name of the appeals board changed from the Board of Property Tax Appeals, or BOPTA, to the Property Value Appeals Board, or PVAB. One of the drivers behind the name change was to take the word tax from the board name, since a property owner cannot appeal tax, only value. Remember, for most taxpayers, the real market value is higher than the assessed value. So if your appeal results in a real market value reduction, there still may not be any tax reduction if the real market value does not go below the assessed value or result in any Measure 5 compression. Referring to the last bullet on the slide, if you have new construction or another Measure 50 exception event and you think your value is too high, this is important, then you need to appeal, because the first year after an exception event is what sets your new maximum assessed value. All right, next slide. This information is also very important, so I'll go through each bullet on the next few slides that deal with the appeal process. Bullet 1, call our office and talk to an appraiser, and we can check to ensure our records are accurate and let you know if you may receive a tax decrease based on your requested value. Next bullet, appeals are processed through the County Property Value Appeals Board, again referred to as PVAB. This is the official first step. Next bullet, PVAB is administered by the county clerk's office, not by the Assessment and Taxation Department. Bullet 4, the appeal paperwork must be filed by December 31st, 2025. That's important. That is a statutory deadline. If you file your appeal online on January 1st at 12:01 a.m., it will not be accepted because it is after December 31st. That's January 1st, 12:01 a.m. 2026. So if you know you want to appeal, don't wait until the deadline. File the appeal early. Bullet 5, PVAB hears value appeals, not appeals on the tax you have to pay. The result may be a lower tax, but you're appealing value. Bullet 6, any value shown on your tax statement can be appealed. And the last bullet, the board starts to consider appeals on the first Monday in February, and the process ends by April 15th, if not sooner. All right, continuing on with these important bullet points. Bullets 1 and 2. Remember, the assessment date is always January 1st for every tax assessment year. This is the date we determine value. For your current values on your tax statement, the assessment date is January 1st, 2025. Bullets 3 and 4, the petitioner has the burden of proof. This means the petitioner will need to have market evidence that shows support for the claim that the assessor's value is incorrect. Bullet 5 talks about preponderance of evidence. So what does that mean? It means the petitioner must persuade the appeals board that it is more likely than not that the facts presented are true. The last two bullets, this information includes a couple of common mistakes. One, comparing your property tax to your neighbor's property tax. Remember, you are appealing value, not taxes. Common mistake number 2 is comparing your values to the values of your neighbors. Your neighbor's home may or may not be similar to your home. Now for the next slide, let's get into some of the information that will hopefully help you in the appeal process. I say help you because even though you're appealing the value that my department puts on your property, we welcome appeals because if we're wrong on the value, our job is to make sure the value is correct. So if you have market information that supports a different value than what we put on your property, give us a call, let us know, file an appeal. All right, so here is the last appeal slide. This is a list of supporting documentation that will help in an appeal. Number one, a recent sale of the property. As an example, if you purchased your home near the January 1st assessment date in an arm's length transaction for $550,000, and we have it valued at $900,000, that could be an indicator that we have your property valued too high. Bullets 2 and 3, a recent fee appraisal. An appraisal will have a list of 4 or more comparable sales that support a value, which is what bullet 3 is describing, a comparison of sold properties similar to yours. Bullet 4, some sort of proof that we have an error in our records. For example, we have your home listed in our records as 2,200 square feet, and it's only 1,200 square feet. Give us a call. Bullet 5 deals with construction costs that can sometimes be an indicator of value for new construction. Last bullet, income and expense information for income producing properties like office buildings, retail centers, and multifamily housing. All right, that's the last of the appeals slides. Scott, any questions on appeals?
No questions.
Okay. Slide 41 of 44, we're getting near the end. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on these next 2 slides, but there is contact information if you would like to talk to a subject matter expert. We do have farm and forest land deferral programs. Jeff Bennett, who you heard from earlier, in the first staff spotlight, is one of our experts on this subject. His contact information is displayed here. And at the bottom of the slide is a snapshot of our website where you can also go to obtain more information, including eligibility requirements on these 2 deferral programs. It's time for some water. Okay. All right, this slide includes the contact information for our expert on the senior and disabled deferral program and for veterans and active duty military exemption programs. You can see Beth Crow's name and contact information displayed. She was the subject matter expert that spoke in the second staff spotlight this evening. And speaking of veterans, next Tuesday is Veterans Day. As a veteran myself of the United States Army, I want to say thank you to all veterans and current service members out there for your service. I appreciate what you have done or what you are currently doing for our country. All right, second to last slide. We have had e-notices for a handful of years now, and I have received a lot of customer feedback that they think e-notices gives you the ability to pay your property tax bill online. That is not true. E-notices is not our online payment vendor. You can pay your property tax bill online through our website, but that is not called e-notices. E-notices gives anyone the ability to receive their property tax statement online via email instead of waiting for it to be delivered by the United States Postal Service. If you are signed up for e-notices, you have access to your property tax statement earlier than those receiving property statements in the mail. This year, everyone signed up for e-notices received an email with a link providing access to their statement on October 21st at 1:08 p.m. This is particularly useful for anyone that travels during property tax season or does not live in the property they own in Clackamas County. I am signed up for e-notices, and this is my 3rd year receiving my property tax statement electronically. I think it is very convenient. and I receive the email on my phone, I can look at my statement right on my phone. I can also download my property tax statement onto my personal computer. I can then easily email the document to my tax advisor during income tax season. I don't have to hunt around my paper file drawers at home. I don't have to call the Clackamas County Assessment and Taxation Department, although you could, to get a copy of my property tax statement because I can't find it. Just a few clicks and it's off to my account. So if you have any questions or difficulties signing up for e-notices, again, this is a recurrent theme. Call our office. We'll help you through it, or type in chat right now and we can help you through it. E-notices. All right. That concludes the presentations. Congratulations if you're still with us. Are there any questions from the viewers?
Yeah, we've got one question. When you mail in your property tax check, about how long does it take for your office to cash that check?
Great question. And you know what? Let's hear from someone we haven't heard from, I don't think, in any of the previous town halls, and that is our Deputy Assessor, Todd Cooper, to see what he has to say on this. And Todd, I'm putting you on the spot, so can you repeat the question, please, Scott?
Yeah, so when you email in your property tax check, about how long does it take for your office to cash the check?
Yes, that's a great question. There are a couple different ways folks can pay their taxes, and depending on the method of payment, can determine how long it takes before those payments are actually posted. But as a general rule, if you pay your taxes around the tax due date, that's the busiest time of year when we have the most payments being made. It could take up to 2 weeks before that payment is posted. But again, it just depends. If you're one of the early birds that pays right away, that payment may get posted within just a day or two. But I would say generally, if you've made a payment and you get into, say, the second week of December, and you've still not seen that check clear, if you've made payment by check, contact our office, and we can definitely look into that for you.
Perfect,
Excellent,
thank
Todd.
you.
Thank you very much. I think that answers. The other thing I'll just add is that we try to post all the checks that we receive by Thanksgiving. So Todd was spot on by saying if we're into December and your check hasn't cleared yet, give us a call. Don't cancel the check because maybe we just haven't gotten to it yet. Call our office to see what the holdup is. And because, like I said before, this year's tax roll is over $1.2 billion. We collect 87% of that by the November 15th, this year, November 17th due date. So there's a lot of money going through our office, a lot of checks that we have to post. It does take a while. It does take a while. Thank you for that question. Scott, any other questions?
Perfect. No, well, I'm gonna actually open it back up again to more questions. So if you would like to ask a question, use the Q&A function, which is at the top or bottom of your Zoom interface, depending on your device. That allows you to write out your question and also be anonymous if you'd like. Those questions and answers will be posted for others to see. Or if you have a more private question unique to your own situation, you can email questions in after tonight's town hall. And then going back to the Q&A function, please remember that using the Q&A function will make your questions public. Again, please be advised that this event is being recorded. Therefore, questions using the Q&A function will be available publicly. Private information should not be shared. And if you don't want to share your information publicly, please contact an assessment and taxation appraiser directly. I'll share all of this information in the chat now to everyone. There you go. Private tax question information. And then again, if you would like to use ask a general tax question, use the Q&A. So with that, we'll go to the questions. Do we have any? Looks like we've got None so far.
That's not surprising. We had a lot and some great questions throughout the presentation.
Several questions, yes. Okay, I'll give it just another minute. And for anybody, any last questions, and then we'll end tonight.
Yeah, sometimes if you're not a speedy typer, it could take a little bit to that question all queued up in the chat.
Correct. Hey, doesn't look like we have any questions. So what I will do is I'm going to go ahead and share one last slide from me about this the contact information. Again, that's 503-655-8671. You can email in propertytax@clackamas.us, and you can always go get more information at clackamas.us/AT. And so with that, I would actually like to wrap up tonight's town hall. I want to thank all of our guests here tonight, including our amazing staff. They were great, answered a lot of questions, very knowledgeable. Bronson, do you have any parting words before we wrap up tonight?
Just reiterating the thanks that you just gave. Thank you for everyone joining us tonight. Thank you, Scott, for facilitating, and Gary Johnson for being in the background and assisting if needed. And thank you to my staff for working after hours to support me and our customers. And lastly, again, if you do have any questions later on at any time, shoot our office an email or give us a call. We're here to help you.
Great. Great. Thank you so much, Bronson. So with that, for Bronson and the entire Assessment and Taxation Department, I want to say thank you. My name is Scott Anderson. Thank you again and have a great night.